Tonight, as you slow down, we'll share straightforward Stoic insights that few people mention about relationships. You'll see why unspoken expectations strain bonds and how clear boundaries bring calm. Feel free to fall asleep. The essentials will stay with you without effort. Tonight, you find yourself here not by accident, but because something in your heart seeks understanding, because somewhere deep within you know that the relationships in your life, whether they bring you joy or pain, are teaching you something essential about who you are and who you can become. The ancient Stoics, those philosophers who walked through empires and survived exile, who loved deeply and lost greatly, understood something about human connection that most never speak aloud. They understood that relationships are not just about the other person. They are mirrors, teachers, and sometimes the most challenging practice ground for wisdom that exists. Over the next hours, you will discover truths that might shift how you see every connection in your life, truths that Marcus Aurelius whispered to himself in the quiet of night, that Epictetus learned in chains, that Seneca wrote with trembling hand. These are not easy truths. They do not promise to make love simple or painless, but they promise something far more valuable. They promise to set you free. Free from the prison of expectation, free from the chains of attachment that masquerade as devotion, free to love with open hands instead of clenched fists. You do not need to remember every word spoken here tonight. You need only to listen, to let these ancient whispers wash over the places in your heart that ache, that hope, that fear. This is not just another video about relationships. This is an invitation to see connection through eyes that have witnessed empires fall and souls rise, through the lens of a philosophy that has survived 2,000 years because it speaks to something eternal in the human experience. Let us begin with the first truth, perhaps the most liberating and most terrifying truth of all. You cannot control how others feel about you, and every moment you spend trying is a moment stolen from your peace. Think about this for a moment, truly consider it. How much of your energy in relationships goes toward managing perception, toward trying to make someone see you a certain way, love you a certain way, treat you a certain way? How many hours have you spent replaying conversations, wondering if you said the right thing, if you showed up correctly, if you were enough? The Stoics understood that this is where suffering begins, in the gap between what we desire from others and what they freely give or withhold. Epictetus said it clearly: some things are within our control and some things are not, and he placed the opinions and feelings of others firmly in the category of things beyond our power. This does not mean we should not care about others, or that kindness does not matter. It means that after you have acted with integrity, after you have shown up as your best self, the response of the other person belongs to them, not to you. Their love, their approval, their understanding. These are not things you can manufacture through perfect behavior or careful manipulation. They arise from within the other person, shaped by their history, their wounds, their capacity, their journey. And none of that is yours to control. Consider a relationship where you have tried everything to make someone love you the way you wish to be loved. You have been patient when you wanted to scream. You have been understanding when you felt hurt. You have twisted yourself into shapes that barely resemble who you are, all in the hope that if you just do enough, give enough, become enough, they will finally see you and cherish you the way you long to be cherished. But the truth the Stoics knew is this: you can be the most magnificent version of yourself and still not be chosen, not because you are lacking, but because we do not control the hearts of others. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire and could command armies, knew he could not command love. He wrote reminders to himself that even an emperor must accept the nature of others, must allow people to be who they are without requiring them to be different. This is not defeat, this is wisdom. When you stop trying to control how someone feels about you, something miraculous happens. You stop performing, you stop exhausting yourself with the impossible task of being everything to someone who perhaps cannot or will not receive it. You begin to direct your energy toward what you can control, your own character, your own choices, your own inner peace. The freedom in this truth is profound. It means that when someone does not love you back, it is not a reflection of your worth. It means that when someone judges you harshly, their judgment lives in their mind, not in your reality. It means that you can release the burden of trying to earn what should be freely given: acceptance, care, presence. You can stop walking on eggshells, stop monitoring your every word and gesture, stop living as though you are on trial and the verdict depends on perfect performance. Instead, you can simply be, fully and authentically, and trust that those who are meant to walk beside you will do so, not because you convinced them, but because something in them recognizes and values something in you. And those who do not, those who turn away or remain distant or offer only crumbs of connection, they are showing you something important. They are showing you that no amount of your effort can bridge a gap they are not willing or able to cross. The Stoic does not take this personally, because the Stoic understands that every person acts according to their own nature, their own understanding, their own limitations. When you internalize this, when you truly accept that you cannot control the feelings of another, you stop abandoning yourself in relationships. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop silencing your needs to avoid displeasure. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable, because you realize that their comfort or discomfort with you is theirs to manage, not yours to prevent. This does not mean you act without care or consideration. The Stoics valued kindness and social duty deeply. It means you act from a place of integrity rather than a place of fear. You speak your truth knowing that it might not be received well, and you make peace with that possibility before you speak. You offer your authentic self knowing that it might not be wanted, and you honor yourself anyway. This is the paradox. When you stop trying to control how others feel about you, you often become more genuinely lovable because you are no longer performing, you are present. And presence, true presence, is magnetic in a way that performance never can be. But even if it is not, even if showing up authentically results in rejection, you have still won because you have remained loyal to yourself, and that loyalty is the foundation of all peace. Tonight, as you prepare to rest, consider the relationships in your life where you have been working too hard, trying too desperately to manage how you are perceived and received. Consider what it might feel like to release that burden, to say silently to yourself, I cannot control how they feel about me. I can only control how I show up, and I choose to show up with honesty and integrity, regardless of the response. Notice how even the thought of this brings a strange relief, a lightness. That is the feeling of freedom, the first Stoic truth about relationships beginning to dissolve the chains you did not even realize you were wearing. And here is what happens when you live this truth. You begin to attract different kinds of relationships, or you begin to experience existing relationships differently. People who want you to perform for their approval start to fall away because you are no longer playing that game. And while this might feel like loss at first, it is actually liberation. In that space, relationships based on something more real can emerge. Connections where you are loved not for your usefulness or your compliance, but for the essential you that exists beneath all the roles and masks. This is what the Stoics meant by living according to nature, not performing an image of what you think you should be, but embodying what you actually are, with all your flaws and gifts, and trusting that this is enough. Not enough for everyone, you were never meant to be for everyone, but enough for the right ones, and more importantly, enough for you. When Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal from those he trusted, when allies turned against him and even his own family disappointed him, he returned to this principle. He could not control their treachery or their weakness, he could only control his response, and he chose to remain just, wise, and measured. He did not crumble because someone failed to love him correctly. He did not lose himself trying to win back favor or force loyalty. He accepted what was beyond his control and poured his energy into what remained within it, his own virtue, his own conduct, his own peace of mind. You can do the same. In every relationship, in every moment of connection or disconnection, you have this choice. Will you exhaust yourself trying to control the uncontrollable, or will you place your energy where it actually has power, within your own mind, your own heart, your own actions? The first truth is an invitation to come home to yourself, to stop seeking your worth in the eyes of others, and to root it instead in the soil of your own character. This does not mean you become cold or indifferent to others. It means you become warm and generous from a place of fullness rather than from a place of need. You offer love, not because you need it returned in a specific way, but because offering love is an expression of who you are. And if it is not received, if it is rejected or ignored or taken for granted, you do not collapse because your center was never in their hands. It was always in yours. This is the beginning of relating as a Stoic. This is the foundation upon which all other truths rest. You cannot control how others feel about you, and the moment you stop trying is the moment you begin to live freely. As the night deepens and your body settles into rest, let this truth sink into the quiet places of your mind. Let it replace the anxiety of wondering if you are enough for someone else with the calm certainty that you are enough for yourself, and that has always been the only approval that truly matters. Sleep now with the knowledge that you are releasing a burden you were never meant to carry, the burden of controlling hearts that were never yours to command. In this release, there is rest, there is peace, and there is the beginning of a wiser way to love. The second truth builds naturally from the first, and it strikes at the heart of why so many relationships become sources of suffering rather than sources of joy. Expecting others to complete you leads only to disappointment and dependence because you were never incomplete to begin with. This idea that another person can fill what is missing in us, that romantic love especially is about finding our other half, is so woven into the fabric of how we understand relationships that questioning it might feel strange, even wrong. But the Stoics would tell you that this belief is the root of immense suffering because it places your wholeness outside yourself. It makes your peace dependent on external circumstances, on another person choosing to stay, to love, to provide what you think you lack. And anything that depends on externals is fragile, subject to loss, to change, to forces beyond your control. Seneca spoke often about self-sufficiency, not the cold self-sufficiency of someone who needs no one, but the grounded self-sufficiency of someone who knows that their fundamental okayness does not hinge on another person. He understood that when you enter a relationship believing the other person will complete you, you are not entering as a whole person seeking connection. You are entering as a half person seeking salvation, and that is too heavy a burden for any human being to carry. Think about the relationships you have seen or experienced where one person, or both, were clinging to the other as though their very survival depended on it, where the thought of separation brought not just sadness, but existential terror, where identity became so enmeshed that neither person could say where one ended and the other began. This is not love, this is dependency, and dependency always breeds resentment because it requires the other person to be something they cannot sustainably be, which is everything. The Stoic understanding is that you come into this world complete. You are born whole. And life is not about finding someone to fill your gaps, but about developing your character, cultivating your virtues, and connecting with others from a place of fullness rather than emptiness. When you believe someone else completes you, you give them power over your emotional state, over your sense of identity, over your happiness, and that power will eventually feel like a prison to them and to you. They will feel the weight of your unmet needs pressing against them constantly, and you will feel perpetually disappointed because no human being can be all things, can meet every need, can fill every void. It is an impossible standard, and relationships built on this foundation crack under the pressure. Marcus Aurelius understood that even in his marriage, even in his deepest friendships, he remained ultimately alone with himself, responsible for his own inner state. This is not a lonely realization, though it might sound that way at first. It is actually liberating because it means that your peace is not at the mercy of whether someone else shows up perfectly today. It means you can love people for who they are, rather than resenting them for who they are not. You can appreciate what they offer without demanding that they offer everything. The truth is that no one can complete you because you are not a puzzle missing pieces. You might be wounded, you might be still growing, you might have areas of your life that need attention and healing, but those are your work to do, not someone else's job to fix. When you enter relationships expecting the other person to heal your childhood wounds, to give you the confidence you lack, to provide the purpose you have not found, to make you feel worthy, you are setting both of you up for failure, because even if they try, even if they pour all their energy into being your source of wholeness, it will never be enough. There will always be something more you need, some way they fall short, because the hole you are trying to fill from the outside can only be filled from within. This does not mean you should not lean on loved ones or that interdependence is wrong. Humans are social creatures. We are meant to support one another, to find comfort in connection, to share our lives with others. The difference the Stoics point to is between healthy interdependence and desperate dependency. Healthy interdependence says, I am whole and you are whole, and we choose to walk together, to support each other, to enrich each other's lives. Desperate dependency says, I am broken and I need you to fix me. I am empty and I need you to fill me. I am lost and I need you to give me direction. One is a relationship between two adults who have done their inner work and continue to do it. The other is a relationship where one or both are children in adult bodies, seeking a parent figure to make everything okay. And here is the painful truth. If you are looking for someone to complete you, you will either drive them away with the weight of that expectation, or you will attract someone who wants to control you, because people who want to be needed in that totalizing way are often people who use choose that need to maintain power. Neither outcome leads to the kind of love the Stoics valued, which is love based on mutual respect, freedom, and the recognition of each person's fundamental autonomy and responsibility for themselves. Epictetus, who spent much of his life enslaved, knew better than most that your inner freedom cannot depend on external conditions. Even when his physical freedom was taken, his inner freedom remained because he understood that no one could complete him or make him whole except his own mind and choices. He carried his completeness within him, and that is what allowed him to eventually become one of the most respected philosophers of his time, despite the circumstances he was born into. This is the power of understanding that you are already whole. It does not mean you are perfect or that you have nothing to learn or no room to grow. It means that your fundamental worth, your basic okayness, your right to peace and happiness, these are not contingent on someone else choosing you. They are inherent, and relationships are meant to be places where two inherently whole people share themselves, not where two halves desperately clutch at each other hoping to become one functional unit. When you stop expecting others to complete you, you also stop resenting them for their inevitable failure to do so. You stop keeping score of all the ways they are not meeting your needs because you take responsibility for meeting your own needs, or for recognizing when a need is not being met and making a clear request or decision. You stop the silent expectation game where you hope they will read your mind, intuit your wounds, and show up in just the right way to heal them, and then punish them with disappointment when they do not. Instead, you show up as an adult who knows themselves, communicates clearly, and takes responsibility for their own emotional experience. This changes everything about how relationships feel. There is space, suddenly, room to breathe, because the relationship is no longer carrying the impossible weight of being someone's entire reason for existing. There is appreciation because you see what the person actually offers, rather than only seeing what they fail to provide against an unrealistic standard. There is freedom because neither person is trapped by the other's desperate need. And paradoxically, when you stop needing someone to complete you, you often experience deeper intimacy, because intimacy requires two separate, distinct individuals choosing to let each other in, and that is only possible when there are two individuals, not one enmeshed blob of unmet needs. Tonight, as you reflect on your relationships, consider where you might have been asking others to complete you. Where have you looked to someone else to provide what you need to provide for yourself? Where have you made your happiness conditional on another person's presence or behavior or feelings? And gently, without judgment, begin to take that responsibility back, not as a rejection of connection, but as a reclaiming of your own power. The Stoics teach that you are the author of your inner life, the captain of your soul, the one responsible for your peace. And when you fully accept that responsibility, you stop being a burden in relationships and become a gift instead. You offer yourself, whole and complete, not perfect but sufficient, and you invite the other to do the same. This is the soil in which real love grows, not the desperate clinging of two people trying to fill each other's voids, but the joyful meeting of two people who know themselves and choose to share that self with another. Sleep now with the quiet knowledge that you are enough. You have always been enough, and no relationship will ever change that fundamental truth. You do not need anyone to complete you. You need only to remember that you were born complete, and every moment you spend looking outside yourself for that completeness is a moment you forget your own sufficiency. The third truth cuts even deeper into the heart of how we misunderstand love, and it is one of the most challenging teachings the Stoics offer about relationships. Attachment is not love, though we confuse the two constantly, and learning the difference between them is essential if you wish to love freely and without the constant fear of loss that poisons so much of human connection. Attachment says, I need you to stay exactly as you are so that I can feel secure. Love says, I see you as you are, and I honor your journey even when it leads you away from me. Attachment grips, love releases. Attachment demands, love offers. Attachment fears change. Love accepts it as the nature of all things. The Stoics, particularly Marcus Aurelius, meditated deeply on impermanence, on the reality that everything we cherish will one day be gone, and rather than seeing this as a reason to not love, they saw it as a reason to love more fully, more presently, and with open hands instead of clenched fists. When you are attached to someone, your connection with them is laced with fear. Fear that they will leave, fear that they will change, fear that you will lose what they provide for you. This fear makes you controlling, makes you possessive, makes you monitor their every move and mood because your security depends on them remaining constant. But people are not constant. People grow and change. People have their own paths to walk. And when your love is actually attachment in disguise, every change in them feels like a threat to you. Consider a relationship where you found yourself becoming anxious when the person spent time away from you, where you questioned their choices, where you felt threatened by their growth or their friendships or their interests that did not include you. That is attachment speaking. That is the part of you that has confused love with possession, that believes caring for someone means keeping them in a shape that makes you comfortable. The Stoics would say this is not love, this is fear. And fear-based connection is always fragile because it requires the impossible, that life stop changing, that people stop evolving, that everything remain frozen in the configuration that makes you feel safe. But life does not work that way. Life is change, constant and relentless, and attachment to what cannot remain is a guaranteed path to suffering. Epictetus taught his students to practice holding things lightly, to enjoy the presence of loved ones while simultaneously remembering that they are not possessions. They are borrowed gifts that will one day be reclaimed. This might sound cold or detached, but it is actually the opposite. It is the practice of loving so fully in the present moment because you are not distracted by anxiety about the future or clinging to how things were in the past. It is the practice of appreciating someone for who they are right now, rather than resenting them for not being who you want them to be or who they used to be. When you love without attachment, you give the people in your life permission to be fully themselves, to make choices that might not include you, to grow in directions that might lead them away. And you do this not because you do not care, but because you care enough to want their highest good, even when it costs you their presence. This is radical. This goes against everything popular culture teaches about love, which often glorifies jealousy, possessiveness, and the idea that you should be everything to each other. But the Stoics saw through that illusion. They understood that true love honors freedom, and any love that requires the other person's imprisonment is not love at all. Marcus Aurelius faced this truth in the most painful way a parent can. He lost multiple children, and he could have spent his life bitter and broken by that loss, railing against the universe for taking what was his. But instead, he returned again and again in his writings to the acceptance of nature's course, to the understanding that nothing is truly ours to keep, that we are all part of a larger flow, and that clinging to what must pass only multiplies suffering. He loved his children deeply. You can feel it in his words, but he loved them as a Stoic, which means he loved them while holding the truth that they were not his possessions, but individual souls on their own journey, and that journey might end before his own. This did not make his love less, it made it more pure, more present, more real. Now think about your own relationships and notice where attachment masquerades as love. Notice where your affection for someone is tangled up with what they do for you, how they make you feel, what they provide. Notice where the thought of them changing or leaving brings not just sadness, which is natural, but panic, terror, a sense that you could not survive it. That panic is attachment, and while it is understandable, while we all feel it, the Stoic path is to see it clearly and gently work with it, to loosen its grip through practice and reflection. One powerful practice is to regularly contemplate the impermanence of all things, not to become morbid or depressed, but to become present and appreciative. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity, and while it sounds grim, it is actually a practice of love. When you allow yourself to remember that your partner, your friend, your parent, your child will not always be here, will not always be in your life, you stop taking them for granted. You stop wasting time on petty arguments. You stop withholding affection over small slights. You treasure the moment you have right now because you understand at a deep level that it is not guaranteed. Seneca wrote letters to his friend Lucilius, reminding him to hold his loved ones as one holds something precious but breakable, with care but without the illusion that you can prevent all breaking. He said that we should kiss our children, embrace our partners, sit with our friends, and silently acknowledge that this might be the last time, not to live in morbid fear but to live in deep presence. When you do this, when you love with this awareness of impermanence, attachment begins to dissolve because you are not trying to freeze time. You are moving with it, accepting it, dancing with it. And in that acceptance, there is a quality of love that transcends attachment, a love that wants what is best for the beloved, even when that path diverges from your own, a love that can hold loss without bitterness because it never forgot that loss was always possible. This does not mean you do not feel grief when someone leaves your life. whether through death or separation or simply growing apart. Grief is natural. Grief is the price of having loved. And the Stoics did not advocate for emotionless detachment. They felt deeply, but they felt cleanly, without the added layer of resistance and resentment that attachment brings. They grieved, but they did not rail against reality. They missed people, but they did not torture themselves with the belief that things should have been different. When you learn to love without attachment, you also free yourself to make clearer decisions in relationships. Sometimes love means staying, sometimes it means leaving, and attachment clouds that discernment, because attachment is invested in a particular outcome regardless of whether it is healthy or right. Love that is free from attachment can look clearly at a relationship and ask, is this good for both of us? Is this helping us grow? Is this aligned with who we are becoming? And if the answer is no, love can release even when attachment would cling. This is the mature love the Stoics point toward. Love that is strong enough to let go, wise enough to recognize when holding on is actually harm, brave enough to honor truth over comfort. As you prepare to rest tonight, reflect on the relationships in your life and gently notice where attachment has been disguising itself as love. Where have you been holding on too tightly, trying to keep someone or something in a form that is already changing? Where have you confused caring with controlling, devotion with dependency? And begin, just begin, to practice loosening your grip. Not because you love less, but because you are learning to love better. Hold the people in your life as you would hold a bird, with enough care that it knows it is cherished, but with hands open enough that it knows it is free. This is the great paradox of love. When you stop trying to possess what you love, when you release your attachment to outcomes and permanence, you often find that love deepens, becomes more real, more present, more alive, because both people can breathe, both people can be themselves, and the connection is no longer based on need and fear, but on genuine appreciation and choice. Sleep now with hands open, with heart open, knowing that everything you love is still there, still precious, still valuable, and that you honor it most, not by clinging, but by cherishing it fully in each moment it is yours to cherish, and releasing it gracefully when it is time to let go. The fourth truth is perhaps the most sobering and the most necessary to accept if you wish to walk through relationships with eyes open and heart prepared. Every relationship you have will end, and knowing this is not morbid pessimism, but rather the foundation for presence and gratitude. This ending might come through death, through separation, through change so profound that the relationship transforms into something unrecognizable, but it will come. Nothing in the human experience is permanent, and relationships being made of time and circumstance and two ever-changing individuals are especially subject to the laws of impermanence. The Stoics did not shy away from this truth. They meditated on it regularly, not to depress themselves, but to wake themselves up to the preciousness of what they had while they had it. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself in the morning that the people he encountered that day, including those he loved most, were mortal, fallible, and temporary, and this reminder made him more patient, more kind, more present. When you forget that relationships end, you live as though you have infinite time. You waste days in resentment over small things. You postpone forgiveness. You take for granted the presence of those who matter. You assume there will always be another chance to say what needs saying or to repair what is broken, but there is not always another chance. Sometimes the end comes suddenly, without warning, without the opportunity for last words or closure, and those who are left behind carry the weight of what was left unsaid, undone, unrepaired. The Stoic practice is to live as though each encounter might be the last, not in a fearful, anxious way, but in a way that brings full attention and appreciation to the present moment. Seneca wrote that we are all on death row, we just do not know our execution date, and this applies not just to our own lives, but to every relationship we are part of. Your partnership, your friendship, your connection with a parent or child or mentor, these are all under the same sentence. The relationship will end, and pretending otherwise is a kind of sleepwalking through life. When you wake up to this truth, really let it penetrate your defenses and sit with it. Something shifts. The petty grievances seem less important. The need to be right in an argument loses its grip. The impulse to withhold love because you are hurt or proud or stubborn softens, because you realize that this moment, this day, this conversation might be all you get. And do you really want to spend it in coldness or anger or distance when connection is possible? This is not about living in fear of loss. It is about living in the light of truth. And the truth is that loss is coming, so what will you do with the time before it arrives? Consider the relationships in your life that have already ended, whether through death or other means, and ask yourself honestly, did you know it was the last time when it was the last time, when you had your final conversation with someone who mattered? Did you know those would be your last words to them? Most of us do not. Most of us assume there will be tomorrow, and then tomorrow does not come, or it comes in a form that makes connection impossible. And we are left with regret, with the weight of unspoken words and unmade amends. The Stoics understood this and used the awareness of ending as a tool for better living. They asked themselves each night, if I do not wake tomorrow, if this person is not here tomorrow, will I be at peace with how I showed up today? This question is a filter that removes so much unnecessary suffering from relationships. It helps you prioritize what matters. It helps you release what does not. It helps you be more generous, more forgiving, more present. Because when you remember that time is limited, you stop wasting it on games and grudges and pretense. You become more real, more vulnerable, more willing to show up as you actually are and to receive others as they actually are, imperfect and human and temporary. This truth also helps you make difficult decisions about relationships that are not serving you or the other person. Sometimes a relationship needs to end not because of death, but because continuing it is causing harm. And the awareness that endings are natural and inevitable makes it easier to release what is no longer working. We often stay in relationships long past their expiration date because we are afraid of endings. We have made endings mean failure or loss, and we resist them even when they are necessary. But if you accept that all relationships will end eventually anyway, then the question becomes not how do I prevent this ending, but how do I honor this ending? How do I complete this chapter with integrity and compassion? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to acknowledge that a relationship has run its course, to thank the person for what you shared, and to release them and yourself to whatever comes next. This is not cold, this is wisdom. Not every connection is meant to last a lifetime. Some people come into your life for a season, to teach you something, to share a part of the journey, and then the paths diverge. The Stoics would say this is natural, this is the way of things, and resisting it only creates suffering. Marcus Aurelius faced the end of relationships constantly. As emperor, he watched allies become enemies, friends betray him, loved ones die. He could have become bitter, closed off, unwilling to form new connections because why bother if they all end? But he chose differently. He chose to continue loving, continue connecting, continue caring, even knowing that loss was inevitable. This is courage. This is the heart of Stoic wisdom. Not to protect yourself from pain by refusing to love, but to love fully with eyes open to the impermanence of it all. He wrote that a blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it, meaning that the Stoic soul takes even the painful truths of life and transforms them into fuel for virtue, for presence, for deeper living. The truth that relationships end can be that kind of fuel. It can wake you up, shake you out of complacency, demand that you show up more fully today because there is no guarantee of tomorrow. It can make you braver about saying I love you, about offering forgiveness, about having the difficult conversations, about being honest and vulnerable. Because if this is all the time you have, why waste it on anything less than truth? Tonight, as you reflect on this teaching, bring to mind the people who matter most in your life. Imagine, just for a moment, that your relationship with each of them will end, because it will, and ask yourself, am I at peace with how things stand between us right now? Is there anything unsaid that needs saying? Is there any grudge I'm holding that is not worth the cost? Is there any way I am taking this person for granted, assuming they will always be there, always be available, always be willing to wait for me to get around to cherishing them? And if you find areas where the answer brings discomfort, let that discomfort be a teacher. Let it motivate you to reach out, to repair, to appreciate, to be more present. The Stoics teach that we should live each day as though it is both our first and our last, with the wonder of a beginner and the wisdom of one who knows time is precious. Apply this to your relationships. See the people you love with fresh eyes, as though meeting them for the first time, noticing things you have stopped noticing, appreciating qualities you have started taking for granted, and simultaneously hold the awareness that this could be the last time, not in a morbid way, but in a way that makes you gentle, patient, kind, real. This practice transforms relationships because it removes the poison of assumption, the belief that there is always more time, always another chance, always the opportunity to do better later. Later might not come, and living as though it will is a gamble with stakes too high. The The Stoics were not gamblers with what mattered. They were pragmatists who looked at reality clearly and adjusted their behavior accordingly. If relationships end, and they do, then the only sane response is to make the time you have count, to love without reservation while you can, to be present without distraction while they are here, to forgive quickly because life is short, to speak truth because silence is a luxury you cannot afford when tomorrow is uncertain. This does not mean you tolerate abuse or stay in harmful situations. The Stoics were clear about maintaining boundaries and protecting your peace. It means that in relationships that are good, that matter, that have value, you do not waste the gift of time you have been given. You honor it by showing up fully, by being as awake and present and open-hearted as you can manage, knowing that one day the relationship will end and you will be left with either the peace of having loved well or the regret of having held back. Sleep now with the quiet awareness that everyone you love is temporary, that all of this is borrowed time, and that the only response to this truth that makes sense is to love harder, forgive faster, and waste less time on anything that is not real. Let this awareness settle into your bones, not as fear but as a call to presence, as an invitation to make tomorrow, if tomorrow comes, a day where you cherish what you have while you have it, where you say what needs saying, where you live as though the people you love are the miracles they are, here now but not forever, precious because they are impermanent, sacred because they will end. The fifth truth the Stoics understood about relationships is one that many people resist their entire lives, often at great cost to their well-being and self-respect. You teach people how to treat you through the boundaries you set and enforce, and when you fail to set boundaries, when you allow behavior that harms you out of fear or guilt or misguided compassion, you are not being loving, you are being complicit in your own mistreatment. This is not blame, this is power. Because when you understand that you have a role in how people treat you, you also understand that you have the ability to change that dynamic, not by controlling others, but by controlling what you will accept, what you will tolerate, and what consequences follow when your boundaries are crossed. The Stoics were clear about this. They spoke often of maintaining your inner citadel, of protecting your peace, of not allowing others to disturb your tranquility through their actions. Epictetus, who knew what it was to be powerless in many ways, was adamant that even a slave could maintain sovereignty over their own mind, their own values, their own inner world, and that part of that sovereignty was deciding what kind of treatment to accept and from whom. This might seem harsh, especially in a culture that often equates love with total acceptance and forgiveness without limits, but the Stoics would say that boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They are guidelines meant to keep relationships healthy, respectful, and sustainable. Think about a relationship where you have felt repeatedly hurt, disrespected, or taken for granted, and ask yourself honestly, what boundaries have I communicated clearly, and what consequences have I enforced when those boundaries were violated? Often the answer is that we have not communicated clearly at all. We have hinted, suggested, hoped, expected the other person to read our minds or intuit our needs, and then felt hurt when they did not. Or we have stated a boundary but failed to enforce it. We said this is not acceptable, but then accepted it anyway. We said I will not tolerate this, but then tolerated it repeatedly. And over time, the other person learned that our words do not match our actions, that our boundaries are suggestions rather than limits, and so they continued the behavior because there was no real consequence for crossing the line. This is not about punishing people or being rigid. It is about integrity, about alignment between what you say and what you do, about treating your own needs and values as important enough to defend. The Stoics valued integrity above almost all else. They understood that you cannot have inner peace if you are constantly betraying yourself by accepting treatment that violates your values or harms your well-being. Marcus Aurelius had to set boundaries constantly. As emperor, he was surrounded by people who wanted things from him, who pushed against his limits, who tested his resolve. He could not afford to be a doormat, not because of his ego, but because the weight of responsibility he carried required that he protect his time, his energy, and his peace. He wrote reminders to himself about not being drawn into the chaos of others, about maintaining his center even when everyone around him was pulling at him. This was boundary setting in action, the practice of saying no, of disappointing people when necessary, of prioritizing what truly mattered over what was merely urgent or demanded. And this is what you must learn to do in your relationships if you wish to maintain your peace and your self-respect. You must get clear about what is acceptable to you and what is not. You must communicate those limits clearly and without apology, and you must be willing to enforce them with action, not just words. This means that if someone repeatedly disrespects you after you have clearly stated your boundary, you must be willing to change the nature of the relationship, to create distance, to reduce access, or in some cases to end the relationship entirely. This is not cruelty, this is self-care. And the Stoics would say it is also a service to the other person, because allowing them to treat you poorly is not helping them become a better human being, it is enabling their worst tendencies. Seneca wrote about the importance of choosing your company carefully, of limiting time with people who drain you or influence you negatively. He understood that we are shaped by those we spend time with, and if you are spending time with people who do not respect you, who do not honor your boundaries, who take advantage of your kindness or generosity, you will eventually become bitter, resentful, and depleted. The Stoic path is to love people, but also to protect your peace, and sometimes those two things require that you love someone from a distance, that you wish them well, but do not allow them close access to you. This is especially true with family relationships, where guilt and obligation often keep people locked in dynamics that are deeply harmful. You can love your family and still set boundaries with them. You can honor your parents and still say no to behavior that harms you. You can care about a sibling and still limit contact if the relationship is toxic. The Stoics would not tell you to suffer in silence out of duty. They would tell you that your first duty is to your own character and peace, and relationships that require you to betray those are not relationships worth maintaining at any cost. Now consider where in your life you need to set better boundaries or enforce the ones you have already set. Where are you tolerating behavior that you know is not okay? Where are you making excuses for someone saying they do not mean it, or they cannot help it, or it is not that bad, when in truth it is that bad and it is affecting you? Where are you sacrificing your peace on the altar of someone else's comfort or approval? The Stoic invitation is to stop, to look clearly at what is happening and to take responsibility for your part in it, not by blaming yourself, but by recognizing that you have more power than you have been using. You can speak up, you can draw lines, you can say this is not acceptable to me and I will not continue in this relationship unless it changes. And then, this is the crucial part. You must be willing to follow through. If the behavior continues, you must be willing to do what you said you would do, to reduce contact, to end the relationship, to walk away. This is not about making threats or trying to control the other person. It is about taking yourself seriously, about proving to yourself that your words mean something, that your needs matter, that you are worth defending. The paradox is that when you start setting and enforcing boundaries, some relationships will end, and that will be painful. But the relationships that survive, the ones where the other person hears your boundary and respects it, those relationships will become deeper and healthier. Because now you are relating as two people who respect each other, not as one person who gives everything and another who takes everything. And you will also find that you feel differently about yourself. You will feel more solid, more grounded, more at peace, because you are no longer betraying yourself. You are no longer the person who tolerates what should not be tolerated. This is the Stoic virtue of courage in action, the courage to stand up for yourself even when it is uncomfortable, even when people might be upset, even when you risk rejection or conflict. Marcus Aurelius faced down senators and generals and enemies, but perhaps his greatest battles were the internal ones, the battles to remain true to himself, to his values, to what he knew was right, even under immense pressure to compromise. You face the same battles in your relationships, the pressure to go along to get along, to keep the peace by abandoning your own peace, to be nice instead of being honest. The Stoic way is to choose honesty, to choose integrity, to choose self-respect, and to trust that the relationships that are meant for you will be able to handle your boundaries, and the ones that cannot were never truly good for you anyway. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, reflect on the boundaries you need to set or strengthen. Write them down if it helps, not to share with anyone, but to clarify for yourself what you will accept and what you will not. And commit to starting tomorrow, not with a grand confrontation, but with small acts of self-respect, with saying no when you mean no, with not over-explaining or apologizing for your limits, with allowing people to be disappointed without rushing to fix their feelings. The Stoics teach that you are not responsible for how others react to your boundaries. You are only responsible for setting them clearly and holding them firmly. Let other people have their feelings about it. That is their work, not yours. Your work is to protect your peace, to honor your values, and to teach people through your actions that you are someone who knows their worth and will not accept less than respect. Sleep now with the quiet strength that comes from knowing that you have the power to change how you are treated, not by changing others, but by changing what you will allow, and that power has been yours all along, waiting for you to claim it. The sixth truth is one that transforms how you view the inevitable conflicts and challenges that arise in any relationship. Conflict does not destroy relationships, it reveals them, and how you and another person navigate disagreement, tension, and difficulty tells you more about the true nature of your connection than 100 easy days ever could. The Stoics understood that friction is not the enemy of relationships, avoidance of truth is. They valued honest discourse, even difficult discourse, because they knew that real connection requires the ability to be honest, to disagree, to work through problems rather than pretending they do not exist. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action, that what stands in the way becomes the way, and this applies to relationships as much as to any other area of life. The conflict you are avoiding, the tension you are smoothing over, the difficult conversation you keep postponing, these are not obstacles to a good relationship, they are the path to a deeper one if you have the courage to walk it. Too many relationships die not from conflict, but from the slow suffocation of unspoken resentments, from the accumulation of small disappointments that are never addressed, from the pretense that everything is fine when it is not. This is a kind of cowardice that the Stoics had no patience for, the cowardice of choosing false peace over authentic connection. Think about the relationships in your life and notice which ones allow for disagreement, which ones can hold conflict without falling apart, and which ones require you to be small, agreeable, and silent to maintain the illusion of harmony. The relationships where you can disagree, where you can say, "This hurt me," or "I see this differently," or "I need something to change," and the other person can hear it without punishing you, those are the relationships built on solid ground. Because those relationships are based on reality, on seeing each other clearly, on mutual respect that is strong enough to handle truth. The relationships where you must walk on eggshells, where expressing a need or a hurt is met with defensiveness or anger or withdrawal, those are relationships built on sand, and eventually they collapse under the weight of everything that has been left unsaid. Epictetus taught that we should speak the truth, but do so with goodwill, not with the intention to harm, but with the intention to clarify, to heal, to grow. This is the art of constructive conflict, of disagreeing without disrespecting, of holding your ground while still honoring the other person's perspective. It requires emotional maturity, self-awareness, and the ability to regulate yourself even when triggered, all qualities the Stoics spent their lives cultivating. When conflict arises, and it will because no two people see everything the same way, you have a choice. You can avoid it, you can suppress it, you can pretend it is not there, and in doing so, you can keep a surface-level peace while the relationship slowly rots from within. Or you can face it, you can bring it into the light, you can say, "We need to talk about this," and you can trust that if the relationship is worth having, it will survive the honesty, and if it is not, then the honesty will reveal that truth so you can stop investing in something that was never going to fulfill you. The Stoics would choose the latter every time because they valued truth over comfort, reality over illusion. They understood that you cannot build anything lasting on a foundation of unspoken resentments and unaddressed issues. You can only build on the bedrock of honesty, even when that honesty is uncomfortable. This does not mean you should be brutal or cruel in how you communicate. The Stoics also valued kindness and considered speech carefully. It means you should be honest and kind, truthful and respectful, clear and compassionate. You can say, "This is not working for me," without attacking the other person's character. You can say, "I feel hurt when this happens," without making them a villain. You can express your needs without demanding that they meet every one of them. This is the skill of adult communication, and it is one of the most important skills you can develop if you want relationships that are real and lasting. Marcus Aurelius dealt with conflict constantly. His life was one long negotiation between competing interests, difficult personalities, and high stakes. He could not avoid conflict, and he learned that the way through it was to remain centered, to speak from a place of principle rather than emotion, to focus on solutions rather than blame. He asked himself before speaking, "Is this true? Is this necessary? Is this kind?" And those three questions are a filter that can transform how you approach conflict in your own relationships. Before you speak in anger or frustration, pause and ask, "Is what I am about to say true? Not just my interpretation, but genuinely true. Is it necessary? Does it need to be said? Will it move things forward, or is it just venting? And is it kind? Can I say this in a way that respects the other person's dignity even while being honest about my experience?" If you can meet all three criteria, speak. If you cannot, wait until you can, or reconsider whether it needs to be said at all. This is the discipline of the Stoic in relationship: to be honest but not reckless, to be clear but not cruel, to stand firm but not rigid. One of the most liberating truths about conflict is that disagreement does not mean disconnection. You can love someone and think they are wrong about something. You can respect someone and still need to set a limit with them. You can value a relationship and still advocate for your needs within it. Many people operate from a belief that conflict means the relationship is failing, and so they avoid conflict at all costs. But the Stoics knew that conflict is simply information. It tells you where the friction points are, where growth is needed, where understanding has not yet been reached. And if you can approach conflict with curiosity rather than defensiveness, with a genuine desire to understand rather than to win, then conflict becomes a tool for deepening connection rather than a threat to it. Ask questions in conflict. Seek to understand the other person's perspective even when you disagree with it. Acknowledge their feelings even when you do not share them, and invite them to do the same for you. This transforms conflict from a battle into a collaboration, from me against you into us against the problem. And this is how the strongest relationships navigate difficulty. They remember that they are on the same team, that the goal is not to defeat each other, but to find a way forward that honors both people. Tonight, as you reflect on this truth, bring to mind any conflicts you have been avoiding, any difficult conversations you have been postponing. Consider what it might take to face them, not with aggression, but with honesty, not to attack, but to clarify, not to win, but to understand. And if there are relationships where conflict is not safe, where bringing up an issue is met with punishment or retaliation, notice that too. Because that information is valuable. It tells you about the true nature of that relationship, and it might tell you that your energy is better spent elsewhere. The Stoics teach that we must be willing to see things as they are, not as we wish they were. And sometimes conflict reveals that a relationship is not healthy, not equal, not safe. And that revelation, while painful, is a gift because it frees you to make a choice based on truth rather than continuing to invest in an illusion. Not all relationships can be saved, some are meant to end, and sometimes conflict is what brings that truth to the surface. If that is the case, the Stoic response is acceptance, grief perhaps, but not prolonged suffering over what was never going to work. Release what cannot be and turn your attention to what can. Sleep now knowing that conflict is not your enemy. Silence is. That the relationships worth having can handle your honesty, and the ones that cannot were never as solid as they appeared. Let this truth give you courage to speak when speech is needed, to address what needs addressing, and to trust that real love, real friendship, real connection can survive the truth and often become stronger because of it. The seventh truth is the one that changes everything once you truly understand it, and it might be the most important truth of all when it comes to relationships. The quality of your relationship with yourself determines the quality of every other relationship in your life, because you cannot offer to others what you have not cultivated within yourself, and you cannot accept from others what you have not learned to give yourself. If you do not treat yourself with respect, you will not recognize respect when it is offered, and you will tolerate disrespect when it appears. If you do not speak kindly to yourself, you will either be hypercritical of others or you will accept harsh treatment as normal. If you are at war with yourself, you will bring that war into every connection, projecting your inner conflicts onto others, seeing enemies where there are simply humans, assuming malice where there is misunderstanding. The Stoics knew this deeply. Their entire philosophy was built on the foundation of self-knowledge and self-mastery, because they understood that you cannot navigate the external world skillfully if your internal world is chaos. Marcus Aurelius spent his life working on himself, examining his thoughts, correcting his judgments, cultivating virtue, not because he was self-absorbed, but because he knew that an emperor who had not mastered himself was dangerous to himself and to everyone under his rule. The same principle applies to you in your relationships. If you have not done the work of knowing yourself, accepting yourself, and treating yourself well, you will struggle in every relationship because you will be bringing an unhealed, unconscious version of yourself to every interaction. Consider how you speak to yourself in your own mind. Are you kind, patient, encouraging, or are you harsh, critical, unforgiving? Do you celebrate your wins or only notice your failures? Do you give yourself permission to rest, or do you drive yourself relentlessly? Do you honor your needs, or do you override them constantly? The answers to these questions predict how you will show up in relationships. If you are harsh with yourself, you will likely be harsh with others, or you will accept harshness from them because it matches your internal dialogue. If you ignore your own needs, you will either ignore the needs of others, or you will resent them for having needs because you have not given yourself permission to have yours. If you do not forgive yourself for mistakes, you will either be unforgiving of others, or you will stay in relationships where you are not forgiven, because that is the relational template you have internalized. The Stoics practiced self-compassion, though they did not use that term. They practiced it by distinguishing between their essential self, which was always worthy, and their actions, which could be improved. Epictetus reminded his students that they were fragments of the divine, that their core nature was good, and that mistakes were opportunities for learning, not evidence of fundamental unworthiness. This allowed them to be honest about their flaws without being destroyed by them, to work on themselves without hating themselves, and this internal foundation of basic self-acceptance is what made them capable of healthy relationships. When you have a good relationship with yourself, you bring a centered, grounded presence into connection with others. You are not looking for someone to validate you because you have learned to validate yourself. You are not desperate for approval because you approve of yourself. You are not clinging because you are not empty. You are not defensive because you are not at war with your own imperfections. You can receive feedback without crumbling because you know that feedback is about behavior, not about your essential worth. You can apologize when you are wrong because admitting fault does not threaten your sense of self. You can celebrate others without envy because their success does not diminish you. You can set boundaries without guilt because you treat your needs as legitimate. All of this comes from the internal work of developing a relationship with yourself that is based on respect, honesty, and compassion. The Stoics called this living according to nature, being in harmony with your true self, and they saw it as the foundation for all virtue and all peace. When you are aligned with yourself, when you know who you are and what you value, when you treat yourself as someone worthy of care, everything else becomes simpler. Not easy, but simpler, because you are no longer at odds with yourself, and that internal coherence radiates outward into every area of your life. Think about the relationships that drain you, the ones that feel difficult or painful or confusing, and ask yourself honestly, how much of this difficulty is about the other person and how much is about my own unresolved inner conflicts that I am bringing into this dynamic? Often we blame the relationship when the real issue is that we have not healed our own wounds, we have not developed our own emotional regulation, we have not learned to love ourselves. And so we enter relationships looking for someone else to do that work for us. And it never goes well, because no one can heal you but you. No one can make you feel worthy but you. No one can fill your emptiness but you. Other people can support you, can love you, can be present with you, but they cannot do your inner work. And when you expect them to, you set up a dynamic that is doomed to disappoint. The Stoic path is to take full responsibility for your inner life, to work on yourself with the same dedication you might bring to a career or a craft, to see self-development as the most important project you will ever undertake, because it is the foundation for everything else. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts, and the quality of your thoughts is something you can control. You can examine them, challenge them, reshape them, and in doing so, you reshape your experience of life and relationships. One of the most powerful practices for improving your relationship with yourself is the same practice the Stoics used, daily self-reflection. Each night, Seneca recommended reviewing your day, not to beat yourself up, but to learn, to notice where you acted in alignment with your values and where you did not, to celebrate growth and identify areas for improvement. This practice builds self-awareness, and self-awareness is the beginning of self-mastery. When you know yourself, when you understand your triggers and patterns and tendencies, you can start to work with them instead of being controlled by them. You can notice, for example, that you tend to withdraw when hurt, and knowing that, you can choose to communicate instead. You can notice that you project your insecurities onto others, and knowing that, you can pause and check your interpretations before reacting. You can notice that you do not ask for what you need, and knowing that, you can practice speaking up. All of this requires a relationship with yourself that is honest and kind, honest enough to see the truth, kind enough not to be destroyed by it. This is the balance the Stoics struck. They were rigorous in self-examination, but compassionate in self-assessment. They held themselves to high standards, but did not expect perfection. As you prepare to rest tonight, turn your attention inward and ask yourself, how is my relationship with myself? Am I treating myself the way I would want to be treated by someone I love? Am I speaking to myself with kindness or with cruelty? Am I honoring my needs or ignoring them? Am I forgiving myself for mistakes or holding them against myself indefinitely? And if you find that your relationship with yourself is not what it could be, know that this is where your work begins. Not in trying to fix your relationships with others, but in healing and strengthening your relationship with yourself. Because when you get that right, when you learn to be your own friend, your own advocate, your own source of validation and compassion, everything else shifts. The people who are not good for you become obvious, and you have the strength to release them. The people who are good for you are able to get closer because you are not pushing them away with your unhealed wounds. You stop repeating the same painful patterns because you have addressed the internal drivers of those patterns. You become capable of the kind of mature, healthy love that the Stoics valued, love that is free, honest, and rooted in two people who have done their own work and come together to share rather than to take. Sleep now with a commitment to tend to your inner world with the same care you might give to a garden, pulling weeds of self-criticism, planting seeds of self-compassion, watering the soil of self-awareness, and trusting that what grows within you will bloom in every relationship you are part of. The eighth truth speaks to one of the most challenging and most liberating practices in relationships, and it is one that the Stoics saw as essential to inner freedom. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to someone who has wronged you. It is freedom you give to yourself from the prison of resentment, because holding on to anger and bitterness does not punish the other person. It punishes you, day after day, moment after moment, as you relive the hurt and feed the story of how you were wronged. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He was betrayed by people close to him, lied to, manipulated. Yet he wrote again and again about the importance of not allowing the actions of others to disturb his peace. He knew that when you hold a grudge, when you nurture resentment, you are giving the person who hurt you ongoing power over your emotional state. You are allowing them to live rent-free in your mind, to disturb your days and steal your peace. And the Stoic response to this is clear. Release it, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. Forgiveness in the Stoic sense is not about condoning what happened. It is not about pretending you were not hurt or that the behavior was acceptable. It is about releasing the energetic and emotional grip that the grievance has on you so that you can move forward unencumbered. Epictetus taught that when you are offended or hurt by someone, it is not the person who insults you or harms you that is the real problem. It is your judgment about what they did that creates your suffering. This might sound like victim blaming, but it is actually empowerment because it places the locus of your suffering in the only place you have control, which is your own mind. You cannot control whether someone betrays you or lies to you or disappoints you, but you can control how long you allow that event to dominate your inner landscape. You can choose to process it, learn from it, and release it, or you can choose to carry it with you like a stone in your pocket, feeling its weight every day, rehearsing the story of the wound, keeping it fresh and alive. The Stoic asks, what purpose does this serve? Does holding this resentment make you happier, healthier, more at peace? Does it change what happened? Does it protect you from future hurt? Usually the answer to all of these is no. The resentment serves no constructive purpose. It simply keeps you tethered to the past, to a moment that is over, to a person who may have moved on while you remain stuck in the narrative of injury. Consider the relationships in your life where you are holding resentment, where you have been hurt and have not fully forgiven. Notice how it feels in your body to think about that person or that event. There is likely tension, contraction, a heaviness. That is the cost of unforgiveness. It lives in you. It affects your nervous system, your emotional state, your ability to be present. And the person you are resenting may be completely unaware, may be sleeping peacefully while you are churning with anger, which means the resentment is harming you far more than it is harming them. The Stoics would say, this is irrational. Why would you choose to harm yourself over and over because someone harmed you once? The logical response is to release the harm, to refuse to continue inflicting it on yourself. This does not mean you have to reconcile with the person. Forgiveness does not require relationship. You can forgive someone and still choose not to have them in your life. You can release resentment and still maintain boundaries. Forgiveness is an internal shift, a decision to stop carrying the weight of what they did, to stop letting it define your emotional reality. It is a gift to yourself, not to them. Seneca wrote about the brevity of life, about how little time we actually have, and he asked, why would anyone want to spend that precious time nursing grudges and feeding resentments when life is so short and there is so much to experience and enjoy? This is the Stoic perspective. Life is too valuable to waste on bitterness. When you forgive, when you release the resentment, you free up energy and attention that can now be directed toward things that actually enrich your life, toward relationships that are healthy, toward pursuits that bring joy, toward growth and learning and presence. Forgiveness is a refusal to let the past dictate your present, a reclaiming of your power to choose peace over pain. And it is a practice, not a one-time event. You might need to forgive the same person or the same event multiple times as layers of hurt come up, and that is okay. Each time you choose forgiveness, you are choosing yourself. You are choosing freedom. You are loosening the grip that the past has on you. The Stoics practice this daily, reviewing their day and releasing any small grievances before they could take root, forgiving quickly so that resentment did not have time to build. This is wisdom, to deal with hurts while they are small, to process and release rather than store and accumulate. Now consider what it would take for you to forgive the hurts you are carrying. What story do you need to let go of? What would it mean to release the identity of the wronged person and step into the identity of someone who has moved beyond the hurt? Often we hold on to resentment because it gives us a sense of righteousness, a story in which we are the victim and someone else is the villain, and there is a strange comfort in that narrative even though it keeps us stuck. The Stoic path is to release that story, not to deny what happened, but to stop rehearsing it, to acknowledge, yes, this happened, it was painful, and now I am choosing to release it because I value my peace more than I value my grievance. This takes courage. It takes a willingness to feel the hurt one more time as you let it go, and it takes a commitment to yourself that is stronger than your attachment to the story. But the freedom on the other side is worth it. When you forgive, when you truly release, you will notice a lightness, a sense of space opening up inside you, and in that space, new possibilities can arise. You are no longer defined by what was done to you. You are free to define yourself by how you responded, by the choice you made to release and move forward. Marcus Aurelius faced profound betrayals, and instead of becoming bitter, he used those experiences to deepen his practice of forgiveness and acceptance. He wrote that the best revenge is to not be like the one who wronged you, meaning that the best response to being hurt is not to carry that hurt forward and inflict it on others or on yourself, but to rise above it, to maintain your character, to refuse to let someone else's poor behavior lower your standards for how you treat yourself and others. This is powerful. This is the high road, and it is available to you in every moment. You can choose to forgive, not because the other person asked for it or deserves it, but because you deserve to be free. Tonight, as you settle into rest, bring to mind anyone you need to forgive, including yourself. Often the hardest person to forgive is ourselves. We hold ourselves to impossible standards and punish ourselves endlessly for mistakes that we would forgive in others instantly. The Stoics teach that you are a human being, fallible and learning, and mistakes are part of the journey. Forgive yourself for not knowing better at the time, for being imperfect, for failing to live up to your own expectations. Treat yourself with the same compassion you would offer to a dear friend who came to you with the same story. And as you practice this forgiveness, notice how it shifts something inside, how it creates space for peace to enter where there was only turmoil. Sleep now with the intention to carry less into tomorrow, to release one grudge, to forgive one hurt, to free yourself one layer at a time from the prison of resentment, knowing that every act of forgiveness is an act of self-love and a step toward the freedom that the Stoics knew was the highest goal of human life. The ninth truth is both simple and difficult, and it requires that you pay attention to what is actually happening rather than what you wish were happening. People show you who they are through their consistent actions, and the Stoic wisdom is to believe them, to see them clearly, to accept the information they are giving you rather than clinging to the potential you see in them or the person you wish they would become. This is not cynicism, this is realism, and the Stoics valued reality above all else because they understood that suffering comes from resisting what is true and clinging to what is false. Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time, and this is fundamentally Stoic wisdom. Too often in relationships, we ignore the red flags. We explain away the concerning behavior. We give chance after chance after chance, not because the person has actually changed, but because we are attached to our story about them, to our hope for them, to our investment in the relationship. And in the process of ignoring what they are showing us, we betray ourselves, we override our own knowing, we silence our intuition, and we stay in situations that are not good for us because we are relating to a fantasy version of the person rather than the actual person standing in front of us. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the importance of seeing things as they actually are, stripping away the stories and judgments and wishes and just looking at the bare facts. He applied this to people as well. He tried to see them clearly, to understand their nature, not to judge them harshly, but to have realistic expectations. He knew that expecting a fig tree to produce apples would only lead to frustration, and expecting a person to be other than they are is the same kind of futile expectation. This does not mean people cannot change or grow. They can, but real change is demonstrated through sustained different behavior, not through promises or explanations or occasional good days surrounded by weeks of the same old patterns. The Stoic looks at the pattern, at what the person consistently does, and takes that as the truth about who they are right now. If someone consistently shows up late, they are telling you that your time is not a priority to them. If someone consistently breaks promises, they are telling you that their word does not mean much. If someone consistently makes you feel small or criticized or not enough, they are telling you that they are not capable right now of making you feel valued. And your job is not to fix them or change them or hope them into being different. Your job is to see them clearly and decide if this is a relationship you want to be in as it actually is, not as you hope it might become someday. Think about relationships where you have ignored what someone was showing you, where you gave them the benefit of the doubt again and again, where you told yourself that next time would be different. And if you are honest, you will probably see that next time was not different, the pattern repeated, because that is who the person was, and you were not accepting that information. This is not about judging the person as bad or wrong, it is about accepting reality. Some people are not in a place to be reliable, some people are not capable of emotional intimacy, some people are selfish or dishonest or unable to meet you in the ways you need, and that is okay. They are on their own journey, but you do not have to stay in relationship with them. The Stoic practice is to see clearly, to accept what you see, and to make decisions based on reality rather than on hope. Epictetus taught his students not to demand that events unfold as they wish, but to wish for events to unfold as they do, and this applies to people. Do not demand that people be other than they are. Accept who they are, and then choose accordingly. If who they are works for you, wonderful, continue the relationship. If who they are does not work for you, release the relationship with acceptance and without bitterness, recognizing that it is simply a mismatch, not a moral failing on either side. This truth is especially important in romantic relationships where the pull of potential can be so strong. You meet someone and you see all the wonderful things they could be, and you fall in love with that potential. And then you spend months or years waiting for them to become that person, making excuses when they do not, telling yourself that they are just going through a hard time or that they will change once this external circumstance shifts. But the Stoics would tell you to stop waiting for potential and start looking at actuality. Is this person, as they are right now, someone you want to be in a relationship with? Not who they might become, not who they promise to be, but who they are showing you they are today, this week, this month, consistently. If the answer is yes, proceed. If the answer is no, then you are staying in a relationship with a fantasy, and that is not fair to either of you. It is not fair to them because you are not seeing them as they actually are, and it is not fair to you because you are settling for less than what you need while hoping for something that may never materialize. The Stoic path is to see clearly, accept fully, and choose wisely. Consider too that people show you who they are not just in the big moments, but in the small ones, in how they speak to service workers, in how they handle frustration, in how they talk about people who are not present, in whether they keep small commitments, in how they respond when you express a need or set a boundary. All of this is information, and if you are paying attention, you will see a clear picture of their character. The Stoics valued character above all else because character is what remains constant. It is how someone behaves when no one is watching, when there is nothing to gain, when it would be easier to take the low road. And if someone's character is showing you that they are not trustworthy, not kind, not honest, not respectful, believe that information. Do not tell yourself that you are being judgmental or harsh. You are being realistic, and realism is the foundation of good decisions. Marcus Aurelius had to evaluate people constantly, deciding who to trust with power, who to keep close, who to keep at a distance, and he could not afford to be sentimental or wishful in those evaluations. He had to see people as they were, and you must do the same in your personal relationships if you want to protect your peace and invest your time and energy wisely. This does not mean you write people off at the first sign of imperfection. We are all imperfect. We all have bad days. We all make mistakes. The Stoics were not perfectionists about others any more than they were about themselves. It means you look at patterns, at what is consistent, and you take that seriously. One instance of lateness is not a pattern, but habitual lateness is. One moment of irritability is not a pattern, but consistent disrespect is. Learn to distinguish between the normal humanity of flawed people trying their best and the consistent demonstration of characteristics that are incompatible with what you need in a relationship. And when you see the latter, have the courage to believe it and act accordingly. This is not giving up on people. This is honoring yourself. And sometimes honoring yourself means walking away from people who have shown you that they cannot or will not meet you where you need to be met. As you prepare to sleep tonight, reflect on the people in your life and ask yourself, am I seeing them as they actually are, or as I wish they would be? Am I accepting the information their actions are giving me, or am I ignoring it in favor of their words or my hopes? And if there are places where you have been ignoring clear information, give yourself permission to see it now, to accept it, and to make a decision based on truth rather than wishful thinking. The Stoics teach that truth is always kinder in the long run than illusion, even when it is painful in the moment, because truth allows you to make choices that actually serve you, while illusion keeps you trapped in situations that do not. Believe people when they show you who they are, trust your own eyes and experience, and honor yourself enough to make decisions based on reality. This is wisdom, this is self-respect, and this is how you build a life surrounded by people who actually match the relationships you deserve. The 10th and final truth is perhaps the most complex and most misunderstood, and it asks you to hold two seemingly contradictory ideas at once, which is exactly the kind of nuanced thinking the Stoics excelled at. Loving someone does not mean you must stay with them, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is to release the relationship and walk away. This goes against so much of what we are taught about love, that love conquers all, that love means never giving up, that if you really love someone you will fight for the relationship no matter what. But the Stoics understood that love and attachment are not the same thing, that you can genuinely care for someone's well-being and still recognize that being in relationship with them is not good for you or for them, and that staying in a relationship that is not working is not noble. It is often cowardly, a refusal to face the difficult truth that sometimes love is not enough. Love does not mean you ignore your own needs. Love does not mean you tolerate treatment that harms you. Love does not mean you sacrifice your peace and well-being indefinitely in the hope that things will change. Real love, Stoic love, includes love for yourself, and sometimes self-love requires that you leave. Marcus Aurelius understood this principle in the context of duty. He often had to make decisions that hurt people he cared about because those decisions were necessary for the greater good or for his own integrity. He did not make those decisions lightly, but he made them because he understood that being loving does not mean being passive or accommodating at all costs. Sometimes love requires difficult action, boundaries, distance, or ending. Seneca wrote about the importance of knowing when to let go. He talked about how clinging to what is no longer good for you is a form of self-harm, and that wisdom includes recognizing when something has run its course. He applied this to possessions, to ambitions, and also to relationships. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Not every person who enters your life is meant to stay, and trying to force longevity in a connection that is no longer serving either person is to fight against nature, against the reality that everything changes, and some things must end. The Stoic accepts endings as a natural part of life, grieves them when they are sad, but does not cling to what needs to be released. Think about relationships you have stayed in longer than you should have, where you knew in your gut that it was over but you stayed anyway out of fear or guilt or hope or inertia. What was the cost of that staying? How much of yourself did you lose? How much peace did you sacrifice? How much resentment did you build? And was the staying actually loving, or was it just avoiding the pain of leaving? Often we tell ourselves we are staying because we love the person, but if we are honest, we are staying because we are afraid of being alone, afraid of hurting them, afraid of the unknown, afraid of failing, afraid of what it means about us that the relationship did not work. These are understandable fears, but acting from fear is not the same as acting from love. The Stoics taught that virtue means acting from principle, from wisdom, from courage, and sometimes courage means admitting that a relationship is not working and having the difficult conversation, making the hard choice, walking away even though you still care. Because caring about someone does not obligate you to stay in a relationship that is damaging to your well-being or preventing your growth. You can wish someone well, you can hope they find happiness, you can cherish the good times you had, and still recognize that continuing together is not the right path. Epictetus taught that we must distinguish between what is ours and what is not ours, and other people, even people we love, are not ours. They have their own path, their own lessons, their own journey, and we cannot walk it for them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step aside and let them walk their path without you, because your presence, your attempt to help or fix or stay, is actually hindering them, keeping them from facing what they need to face, enabling behavior that needs to change. And the same is true in reverse. Sometimes someone else's presence in your life, no matter how much you love them, is hindering you, keeping you small, preventing you from becoming who you need to become. And recognizing that and making the choice to leave is not a failure of love. It is a success of wisdom. It is the ability to see clearly, to prioritize truth over comfort, to honor the reality that not all connections are meant to be permanent, and that endings, while painful, are sometimes necessary for growth. The Stoics valued growth and virtue above all else, and if a relationship is preventing you from growing, from being virtuous, from living alignment with your values, then staying is not the loving choice, leaving is. This truth also applies to relationships where there is abuse, manipulation, or consistent harm. Love does not require you to stay in danger. Love does not mean you accept mistreatment. Love does not mean you endure harm in the hope that the person will change. If someone is harming you, the loving thing to do for yourself is to leave, and the loving thing to do for them, though they may never see it this way, is to refuse to enable their harmful behavior by staying and accepting it. When you stay in a relationship where you are being harmed, you are teaching the other person that their behavior is acceptable, that there are no consequences, and that is not good for them. It allows them to continue in patterns that are destructive. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to set a boundary so firm that it requires you to leave, and trust that they will either learn from the consequences or they will not, but either way you are no longer participating in the harm. The Stoics were clear about this. You are responsible for your own well-being, for your own virtue, and you cannot sacrifice those in service of someone else's comfort or avoidance of consequences. Consider now the relationships in your life and ask yourself honestly, are there any where you are staying not because it is good for you, but because you are afraid to leave, because you feel guilty, because you think you should, because you love the person and believe that love means staying no matter what? And if there are, give yourself permission to reconsider. To ask whether this relationship, as it actually is right now, is one that supports your growth, your peace, your well-being. To consider whether you are staying out of love or out of fear. To imagine what it might be like to leave and notice whether that imagination brings relief, which is often a sign that leaving is the right choice. The Stoics teach that we must be honest with ourselves, that self-deception is one of the greatest obstacles to a good life, and often we deceive ourselves about relationships, telling ourselves stories that keep us stuck because facing the truth is too painful. But the Stoic path is to face the truth, to look directly at what is, and to make choices from that place of clarity. If the truth is that a relationship is no longer working, that you have outgrown it, or that it is harming you, or that the other person is not willing or able to meet you in the ways you need, then the loving choice might be to release it. This does not mean you stop caring about the person. You can carry love for someone in your heart for the rest of your life and still not be in relationship with them. You can wish them well, you can remember the good, you can be grateful for what you learned, and still know that your paths have diverged and that trying to force them back together serves no one. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He loved many people from a distance, people who were no longer in his life or who had betrayed him, and he did not carry bitterness. He carried acceptance. He accepted that people are who they are, that relationships change, that life moves on, and he moved with it, grieving what needed to be grieved, but not clinging to what was gone. This is the maturity the Stoics cultivated, the ability to hold love and letting go at the same time, to honor what was without demanding that it continue, to release with grace what can no longer be held. As you settle into sleep tonight, reflect on this final truth and let it free you from any guilt you might carry about relationships you have left or are considering leaving. Loving someone does not trap you, does not obligate you to stay in situations that are not good for you. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to prioritize your peace and your growth. And doing so does not make you selfish or unloving, it makes you wise. The Stoics teach that wisdom is the highest virtue, and wisdom sometimes means making difficult choices that disappoint others but honor yourself. Sleep now knowing that you have walked through 10 truths that the ancient Stoics understood about relationships, truths that can set you free if you let them. You cannot control how others feel about you. You are already whole and do not need someone to complete you. Attachment is not love. Every relationship will end. You teach people how to treat you through boundaries. Conflict reveals character. The quality of your relationship with yourself determines all others. Forgiveness is freedom from your own prison. People show you who they are, believe them, and loving someone does not mean you must stay. These truths are not easy. They require courage and honesty and a willingness to see clearly, but they are the path to relationships that are real, healthy, and rooted in freedom rather than fear. The Stoics lived these truths 2,000 years ago, and they remain as relevant today as they were then because human nature does not change. The challenges of connection remain constant, and the wisdom needed to navigate them is timeless. Carry these truths with you. Return to them when relationships challenge you, and trust that in them you have a foundation strong enough to hold you through whatever comes. You are not alone in this. The Stoics walked this path before you. They faced the same struggles, the same heartbreaks, the same difficult choices, and they found peace not by avoiding relationships, but by approaching them with eyes open, hearts strong, and minds clear. You can do the same. Rest now in the knowledge that you have everything you need within you to build relationships that honor you and others, to love without losing yourself, to connect without clinging, to be fully present with what is rather than lost in what you wish things were. Tomorrow when you wake, these truths will still be here, quiet companions on your journey, reminding you that the Stoic path in relationships is not the easy path, but it is the path to freedom, and freedom is the goal of all philosophy and all life. Sleep well, rest deeply, and know that in learning to relate to others with Stoic wisdom, you are learning to live fully, truly, and freely in a world where connection is both the greatest challenge and the greatest gift we are given.